Hey guys, welcome to another Raider Glory Guide video. This time we're going to go in depth about the Nerub-ar Palace and explain to you how to obtain your very own Shadowed Swarmite. So let's start. For Ulgrax the Devourer's achievement, Slimy Yet Satisfying, you will first need to locate a special NPC named the Spider Silk Grub. You could find it in the upper right corner of Ulgrax's arena before the boss is engaged. He is a friendly target, but you cannot actually heal the NPC or use spells like Rescue or Leap of Faith on it. This will be very important in a moment. Once the boss is pulled, anyone in your raid can then interact with the Silk Grub NPC, which begins the achievement. You have 20 seconds to do so before it eventually despawns, and the fight would just progress like it normally would have. From here on, you have to do everything in your power to keep this grub alive at all times for the entirety of the fight. The way you do this is when your character approaches the grub, it will cause it to run away, usually in the direction you are also moving, so long as you are facing its back. If any of Ulgrax's mechanics hit this grub, it will very likely kill it, forcing you to restart the achievement since it cannot be respawned. The scariest time for the grub is usually during the intermission phase where Ulgrax is charging across the arena. For my group, we had a single player herd the grub as far away from the group as possible to ensure as little mechanics would spawn in its way. We also did our best to bait the charges during the intermission far from the worm and allowed as much space as possible. Another strategy to speed this achievement up is to opt for less healers in your group, as this isn't a very heal-heavy fight anyways, so the quicker you just zerg the boss down, the less you have to worry about certain mechanics hitting the grub and killing it. But basically, so long as the grub is alive and the boss is dead, you get your achievement. For the Bloodbound Horrors, You Can't See Me, you have to defeat the boss after every single player in your raid has had the Slimed debuff applied to them. In order to apply this debuff, you have to be in the down phase of the encounter, otherwise known as the big tank frontal that lets you see the ads for the fight anyways. Once you are in this phase, if you look along the outer edges of the arena, you will find small, neutral, critter-sized NPCs that look like a glob of slime with eyeballs in it. All you need to do is run your character over this slime and stomp on it, applying the debuff to yourself. Once all of your raiders have done this, have them stack together on a certain position of your choosing to then spawn the volatile Ooze NPC, a much larger hostile ad that must be killed to earn credit for the achievement. It has relatively small health and doesn't really do anything but melee whoever has it, so it's not entirely needed to just hold lust for this. We had a couple of buggy interactions where things like a hunter's disengage would remove the slime debuff altogether, and then they were unable to get another application due to the slimes not actually respawning, which they normally don't. But there were also times where things like a paladin's bubble would be totally fine, so just be aware if you still actually have the debuff or not when you're pressing buttons. There are enough slimes for a 30-man team, so usually one per person at least. And also because everyone needs the debuff to spawn the ad, you cannot die until that point. If you die with the debuff and then get battle rezzed, you should still have your debuff from the start, but obviously brezzes are in a limited amount, so be careful and try to just stay alive up until the stacking point. Damage isn't super important here, but making sure the ads in the down phase are dead still is, so be sure and try to prioritize them before you get your slime debuff. Once the new slime ad is dead though, you can just kill the boss as necessary and get your achievement. For Sikran's Sick Parry Bro achievement, you will first need to locate 4 special weapon racks just before the bridge that leads you to his arena. You could see them in this screenshot here if you need any help. It doesn't matter who picks these weapons up when interacting with them, but maybe consider having your stronger players use these first. Once the boss is pulled, the people with these weapons will gain an extra action button that lets them throw their weapon at the boss. Sikran will then parry the thrown weapon and deal some damage to whoever threw it, and then apply a debuff to them that causes them to take 20% more damage from all sources. This debuff is permanent until the boss is dead or you wipe, so that's why it may be worth to have your better players do this first. The entire raid must complete this process of applying the riposte debuff to themselves, and once every single person has done so, you can kill the boss. Dying after you apply this debuff is totally fine, you just need to do it once and then your job is done. At that point, you're just waiting for the rest of the team to throw the weapons anyways. This does however mean that if you die before applying the debuff, you will either need to be rezzed or reset the boss, as you never actually gave yourself the debuff in the first place. A slightly tricky part of this achievement is that when a melee will throw their weapon, it will then drop it in melee. And with all the visual clutter that's going on, you can sometimes miss where it actually is. So if this happens, it can be wise to drag the boss away to see where the weapons are in the floor, and then just have them throw them. After that, just do the normal mechanics and kill the boss. On Rasha'nan's Cowabunga achievement, it states that all players must ride a single wave per cast of rolling acid. This almost makes it seem like you need to get hit by both waves at the same time, but the truth is a bit simpler. Basically, what you want to do is have the entire raid get hit by the rolling acid waves only a single time for every cast of the waves themselves. If a player gets hit twice by the waves, meaning both the left and the right one hit them, you will fail the achievement. The strategy to have in mind here is when the waves go out, have the marked players both move to the far left of the raid while everyone else stays relatively in the middle. The person with the wave firing off to the left should be a larger distance away from the one on the right as to not get hit by both at the same time and then fail the achievement. If done correctly, the player with the left wave will get hit only a single time by their own, and the right wave will then swarm over the raid and hit everyone else a single time. I recommend tracking this achievement at all times with your raid and seeing if the text changes from red to white. It will display as red while the waves are going out, but this doesn't automatically mean you failed. It's like a pending credit type thing. If your raid does the mechanic correctly, the achievement will turn white, showing you've done it right, and stay red for doing it wrong. If it stays red, it means either someone got hit by 2 waves at once, or at least one player wasn't hit at all. This visual will repeat until the boss is dead for every cast of the green waves that go out, so it's good to keep an eye on it if you're not using any sort of add-on to track the progress. Basically, send both of your wave players to the far left, with the left wave a bit further than the right. After that, everyone gets hit, and you do this until Rasha'nan is dead alongside all the other mechanics. Probably one of the dumber achievement names, Would You Still Love Me If I Was a Worm, requires your raid to prove their love to the disheartened worm NPC. Before anything though, you have to first collect the mysterious glowing egg found on the way to Broodtwister Ovi'nax's room. Whoever holds this egg will be slowed, so someone like a shaman and ghost wolf or a druid would be good to hold on to this, but it's really not a big deal. At this point, you'll carry the egg into the boss's room and begin the encounter. Shortly after the boss moves to their first section to ingest the black blood that fills the room, players will get marked with an experimental dosage debuff that looks like a purple circle around their character. These players will need to hit the player carrying the egg with the circle in order to make it hatch. What my group did was on the first set of the dosage circles, we just hit the egg carrier on top of the boss and hatched it immediately, as it does need to be hit twice in order to spawn it. After this, a new NPC will spawn. At first, it is hostile to you. Everyone in the raid needs to target this disheartened worm and type /love in the chat while targeting it. After everyone in the raid has done this, it will become friendly and aid you in your encounter, fulfilling the criteria for the achievement. You can make a macro to speed this up a lot, as spamming it will not bring any sort of harm for the achievement. If you want one, you can copy the one on the screen right now. It should be noted that the longer this NPC is hostile, the more you risk accidentally killing it or allowing it to kill you. So the moment it has spawned, have your entire raid spam their macros like crazy to get the achievement done ASAP, and then just do the fight's mechanics as needed. You'll know you've done the /love mechanic correctly when you receive a debuff called Affectionate, so be on the lookout for that. For Nexus-Princess Ky'veza's Killstreak achievement, you will first need to locate her diary in a brazier to the left of the entrance of her arena. Do not click this immediately, as it will start the encounter and the achievement if you do so. Once the diary is clicked, the player who did so will immediately be killed by the boss and give them a 45-second buff called Killstreak. If this buff ever times out, the achievement will fail. In order to refresh the duration of this buff on the boss, a member of your raid will have to die, thus preserving her Killstreak. So essentially every 40-ish seconds, you need to have someone on your team die. Otherwise you will have to reset and try again. The diary that started this achievement will also not be an option, so no super easy way to just get yourself killed, unfortunately. What my group did was for every cast of the void portal she drops that pulls the raid around, at least one person just purposely went into the center of it and killed themselves instantly. The real tricky part was to actually extend her buff during the Starless Night cast in the intermission phase. On normal mode, it's definitely a lot less damage during this phase, trying to get yourself killed on purpose to refresh the buff. For my group, we actually had our warlocks casting Burning Rush to purposely wither down their health during the intermission to refresh the Killstreak buff. If you do not have access to warlocks, it may be worth designating a player to die in the line dashes the boss is casting at a certain location. This does also pressure your group a bit more to make that DPS check, so it would be smart to potentially drop your lowest DPS members first before your top 5 or so. And as a final get killed quick emergency scenario, you could always just have a class that has access to a taunt the boss, and then get one shot by her melee. If her buff is still applied when she dies, you're all done and you can move on to the next boss. For the Silken Court's Love is in the Lair, you will first need to grab 2 special items. They are called the Nerub-ar plushie and the box of candy, which you can find on the map here. It doesn't matter who grabs these, you will just need to do so for the achievement to actually work. Once the 2 players with these items reach the Silken Court boss room, they will be given access to an extra action button that allows them to throw the items at the bosses. This will buff both of the bosses with the Bond of Friendship. This buff causes the bosses to heal for 1% of their HP every 3 seconds while within 35 yards of each other. This basically means you will just do the fight the exact same way as you would any other day, but now the 2 cannot be next to each other as much as possible to prevent them from healing. A couple things to note from this, however. There were moments that I still don't fully understand that caused the health of the bosses to desync, meaning that one was at 30% for example and the other was at 25%. This isn't a big deal really, and actually lets you kill one of them earlier than the other if this does happen, removing their mechanics from the encounter. This is only scary during Phase 3 however if you were to kill Takaj, as there's no longer would be a way to get partnered with a web link to trip Anubarash's charge mechanic. It also must be noted that while you cannot actually see the other's counterpart during their intermission phases, they did burrow directly beneath the other and are still there while the boss is shielded. This does mean they are healing every 3 seconds while you are in the intermission phases, so if you are struggling a bit for damage, this may be a good time for your bloodlust and cooldowns in order to make sure they do not heal as much. This will happen, so the boss's healing is inevitable but only during the intermission phases. Any healing outside of this is done because the tanks are not dragging Anubarash away from Takaj. But just do the fight all the same, just with a lot less cleave now. For the final boss, Queen Ansurek's missed him by that much, it can only be completed in Phase 3. So if your group is having trouble, just prioritize actually getting to this phase before worrying about the achievement. In this phase, the boss will cast Abyssal Conduit, marking 2 players with a blue circle that will then drop a portal at the location they were standing when it ends. You will use these portals to avoid the encroaching ring from Frothing Gluttony normally, and you will just do so again for this achievement, just a bit weirder. Essentially what you want is for the portals to guide your raid to teleport underneath the boss as you move to avoid the damage of the ring. What that basically looks like is the screenshot here, where one portal is placed closer to the inner ring of the donut and the other player runs to the opposite end to make sure players teleport underneath Ansurek. The good news is that if you're dead at this point, you don't have to do this, but if you are still alive, you have to do the teleport under the boss. So no mages using Blink or Shimmer or anything like that to avoid the ring, as it is crucial you actually debuff Ansurek with the stacks of missed him by that much, signifying you're doing it correctly. If everyone alive does the achievement like they're supposed to, the dead players will receive a criteria for the achievement, and then you can kill the boss and collect your mount. And that's it! I hope this guide has proven useful to you and your group. If you're ever interested in joining a community of players that do these sorts of runs often, join my Discord in the link below. I host them quite frequently and will take anyone so long as they're willing to be chill and just hang out. Also, be sure to subscribe for future guide videos and stuff of that sort. Thanks!